The house smelled of roasted turkey and broken trust. The dining room, once filled with warmth and laughter, now held only cold resentment. At the head of the table stood Ethan, face flushed, glass raised like a challenge. "Dad," he said, voice cutting through the silence, "you are no longer part of this family. We've passed you." The words hit harder than any blow. Guests froze, eyes darting between us. Cassandra, his wife, smiled thinly, eyes sharp with satisfaction. I smiled back, colder than they expected. Calmly, I handed Ethan a thick folder. "Here's a parting gift for you, son." His hands trembled as he tore it open. Then he screamed, a raw, desperate sound echoing through the room. No one yet knew my revenge had just begun. The old oak table was scarred from decades of family dinners, bearing the weight of battles fought and memories made. Plates lay abandoned, coffee cooled in chipped mugs. Ethan paced like a conductor of chaos, gesturing wildly, while Cassandra sat across, arms crossed, and nails tapping disdainfully. "Dad, we need the money," Ethan snapped, voice sharp enough to shatter glass. "This house is falling apart. You can't keep hoarding cash while we're stuck here." I raised an eyebrow, steady despite the jab. "Hoarding? I paid this mortgage before you were born, Ethan. What is this really about?" Cassandra leaned forward, smile thin and cold as frost outside. "It's about progress, Gerald. We want to modernize. New floors, new furniture." "You wouldn't understand." I understood plenty. The repairs were a flimsy excuse. Cassandra's phone rested against her wine glass, displaying a glossy photo of a leather sectional costing more than my first car. Ethan slammed a folded contractor's estimate onto the table, bloated with unnecessary upgrades. I didn't have to look. They'd already spent that budget in their heads. "You've got savings, Dad," Ethan pressed, voice rising. "What's the point of sitting on it? You're not getting any younger." The jab stung, but I kept my eyes on the table, tracing a familiar scratch. It was from when Ethan was 10, carving his initials with a butter knife, back when he still looked at me like I was his hero. "I've given you enough," I said quietly. "You live here rent-free. That's more than most get." Cassandra scoffed, a laugh like a blade wrapped in silk. "Rent-free? This place is a museum, Gerald. We're doing you a favor by staying." Ethan slammed his spoon down. The clatter echoed. "You're so damn selfish. You think you're some saint, but you're just holding us back." A heavy silence fell, the kind that presses on your chest and leaves no room to breathe. I tightened my grip on the cold fork, knuckles whitening. This wasn't the first time Ethan raised his voice, but this felt different, raw, final. Cassandra's eyes glinted with triumph, like she'd been waiting for this moment. I could have shouted back, listed every sacrifice, the overtime shifts, the college tuition, the car I sold to buy his first junker, but words wouldn't reach them anymore. "Selfish," I repeated, letting the word hang. "That's what you think." Ethan leaned closer, breath heavy with wine. "You're damn right you're not needed here anymore, Dad. We can handle this place without you." The air shifted, thick with the weight of his words. Cassandra's lips twitched in barely concealed satisfaction. I set the fork down deliberately and stood. The chair scraped against the hardwood, louder than it should have. I looked at Ethan, then Cassandra, their faces mirrors of greed and certainty. They thought they'd won. "I see," I said, voice steady despite the fire burning inside me. "You've made yourselves clear." My boots thudded heavily on the floor as I walked toward the hallway. Ethan called after me, voice mocking. "What? That's it? You're just gonna sulk?" I didn't answer. The chipped paint on the dining room door was a ghost of better days. As I reached for the knob, a single thought burned bright in the haze of betrayal. I'd given him everything, my time, my dreams, my home. No more. The door clicked shut behind me, muffling their voices. I stood in the dark hallway, pulse steadying. They thought they could break me. They were wrong. I would show them what selfish really meant. My bedroom was a time capsule, every corner holding ghosts of a life I'd built and lost. The wooden bed creaked as I sat, the mattress sagging from years of restless nights. A single lamp cast a warm glow over a framed photo of Margaret and Ethan, taken when he was 6, his gap-toothed grin staring back at me. So different from the man who just screamed he didn't need me. My fingers trembled as they brushed the glass. How had it come to this? The house was silent now, the kind of quiet that amplifies your thoughts. I opened the drawer of the bedside table and pulled out an old photo album. Its leather cover was worn smooth. Flipping through, I stopped at a picture of Ethan at 16, holding a football, eyes bright with dreams I'd helped fund. I'd sold my Chevy to pay for his college applications, telling Margaret it was just a car. She squeezed my hand, her smile saying she knew better. We both believed it was worth it. Another page, another memory. Ethan's graduation. I'd worked double shifts to cover tuition, back aching from long hours on construction sites. He'd hugged me that day, his cap askew, promising to make me proud. I'd believed him. Now the memory twisted like a knife. He'd never said thank you. Not once. After Margaret's cancer took her 3 years ago, he drifted further away, leaving me to rattle around this house alone, until Cassandra came along, her sharp ambitions sinking claws into him. I turned the page and found a folded receipt, yellowed with age, tuition payment, $12,000, dated 2005. I drained my savings for it, telling myself it was an investment in his future. My future, too. I thought I'd found someone to carry on the family name, to share the life I'd built. Instead, he brought home Cassandra, her cold eyes sizing up the house like a prize to be claimed. She changed him, or maybe she just revealed who he'd always been. The album snapped shut. I set it aside, gaze falling on Margaret's photo, her soft curls, warm eyes. They'd always steadied me. "Liz," I whispered, voice rough. I gave him everything, but trying wasn't enough. Not when he stood in my dining room, spitting venom, egged on by a woman who saw me as an obstacle. The fork I'd gripped earlier flashed in my mind, its weight a reminder of the anger I'd buried. No more burying. I stood and crossed to the window. Outside, snow fell in slow, heavy flakes, blanketing the street in white. The neighborhood was asleep, Christmas lights blinking through the haze. I pressed my hand to the cold glass, my reflection staring back. Gray hair, tired eyes, jaw set with purpose. I'd spent decades being the father who provided, who forgave, who waited. And for what? To be told I wasn't needed? A memory surfaced. Ethan, maybe 8, slamming his bedroom door after I'd grounded him. Even then, he had a temper. But he'd always come back sheepish with an apology. That boy was gone. The man he'd become didn't deserve my patience. Neither did Cassandra, with her calculated smiles and dreams of a life she hadn't earned. I picked up my phone from the nightstand, its screen glowing in the dim room. My thumb hovered over Martin's number. He'd know where to start. A man who'd seen the world's ugliness and still came out swinging. The snow kept falling, soft and relentless. I wasn't a victim anymore. I'd been their foundation for too long. It was time to build something new. The house was quiet now, the echoes of that bitter Christmas dinner still lingering in the air. I sat alone in the dim living room, the weight of memories pressing down on me. It wasn't just the fight, the betrayal. It was everything that led us here. The years of sacrifice I gave, the moments I thought we shared, now felt like distant shadows. I reached for the worn photo album on the coffee table. Its leather cover was soft from years of handling. Flipping through the pages, I saw the faces of a family that once was. There was Ethan as a boy, his smile wide and full of hope, holding a football just like he dreamed. Margaret, my late wife, standing beside him, her eyes warm and steady, the kind that made everything feel safe. I remembered the nights working double shifts, the aching muscles and tired hands, all to make sure Ethan had what he needed. The college tuition I paid, the car I sold to keep the bills covered. Margaret and I believed we were building a future, one worth fighting for. But as the pages turned, the smiles faded. The boy who once looked up to me was now a stranger. The warmth we shared with Margaret's passing had slowly slipped away, replaced by cold distance. Ethan's visits grew rare, his words sharper, his patience thinner. And then came Cassandra, with her ambitions and sharp smiles, changing the son I knew, or perhaps revealing who he always was. I held a faded receipt in my hand, the date marked 2005, tuition payment, $12,000. Money I drained from my savings, telling myself it was an investment in a bright future. But that future wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to a different family now. Closing the album, I looked at Margaret's photo on the mantel. Her gentle face seemed to ask why we let it come to this. I whispered her name, Liz, my voice barely a breath. I gave everything to my family, but love wasn't enough. Not when greed and bitterness took hold. The fork I gripped at dinner flashed in my mind, the weight of anger and disappointment I'd kept inside for so long. No more burying the pain. No more pretending everything was okay. Outside, snow fell softly, blanketing the world in quiet. The Christmas lights blinked through the haze, a faint reminder of happier times. I pressed my hand to the cold window, my reflection staring back. Gray hair, tired eyes, but a jaw set with determination. I had been the father who provided, who forgave, and who waited. For years. And for what? To be told I was no longer needed. A memory surfaced. Ethan, just 8, slamming his bedroom door after I grounded him. Even then he had a temper. But he always came back with a sheepish apology. That boy was gone. The man he'd become didn't deserve my patience. Nor did Cassandra, with her calculated smiles and dreams she hadn't earned. I reached for my phone and stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over Martin's number. My trusted friend and lawyer. He'd know where to begin. The snow fell quietly outside, soft and relentless. I was done being a victim. I was the foundation they'd built on, but now it was time to build something new. The sting of betrayal was still fresh, but anger alone wouldn't win this fight. I needed a plan, something sharp and precise, like the blueprints I once drafted in my younger days. Sitting across from my old friend and lawyer, Martin, the weight of the situation finally began to crystallize. Martin was a man who didn't waste words. His graying hair and sharp eyes carried the quiet confidence of someone who had seen plenty of battles, both in courtrooms and in life. We'd been through thick and thin together, back when I was still an engineer designing buildings meant to last. Now, he was going to help me design a way to protect what was mine. I laid the folder on his desk, the one filled with every scrap of evidence I'd gathered. Late payment notices, bank statements, credit card bills linked to Cassandra's reckless spending, and even recorded conversations where Ethan and Cassandra schemed to push me out. Each paper told a story of greed and deception, but more than that, they were my shield. Martin flipped through the documents with a steady hand, nodding as he absorbed the details. "You've done your homework, Henry," he said. "This isn't just about money. It's about control, about setting boundaries where they've been crossed." I met his gaze, feeling a spark of hope amid the cold reality. They think I'm old, weak, that I'll crumble under the pressure. They're wrong. "We'll make sure of that," Martin replied, leaning forward. "First step is to freeze those accounts. Stop the bleeding before it's too late." I felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just about money, it was about respect, about reclaiming my place in the life I'd built. Martin explained the legal moves: eviction notices, trust restructuring, and, if necessary, guardianship challenges. Each sounded heavy, but they were tools I'd use carefully and strategically. As we worked through the plan, I thought about Ethan, the son I'd raised with love and sacrifice, now turned adversary. Part of me still hoped for reconciliation, but reality was harsher. I couldn't afford sentiment when my home and dignity were at stake. Later that evening, I sat alone in the quiet bar where Martin and I had shared countless memories. The low hum of conversation and clinking glasses surrounded me, but my mind was focused. The amber liquid in my glass caught the dim light, but I didn't drink. This was no time for celebration, only calculation. Martin joined me, sliding into the booth opposite. "You ready for this?" he asked, a faint smile tugging at his lips. I nodded. "They want a war. I'm ready." He raised his glass, a silent toast to battles fought and won. Hit them where it hurts. Their pride, their money, their plans. It's time to turn the tables. The plan was coming together, piece by piece, like the sturdy foundations of a building I once crafted. This time, I wasn't just rebuilding. I was reclaiming everything they'd tried to take. The air in the house felt heavier, thick with secrets and silent betrayals. I was no longer just a man fighting for respect. I was preparing for war. The quiet moments between the fights were the most dangerous, the perfect cover for greed to fester and plans to form. I sat at the worn kitchen table, a battlefield strewn with papers, receipts, and forgotten bills. Each document was a piece of the puzzle, evidence of their recklessness and deceit. Cassandra's extravagant shopping sprees, Ethan's mounting debts, missed mortgage payments on a property they'd boasted about owning. Their careless spending was unraveling the life I'd built. Their entitlement was a house of cards, and I held the blueprint to bring it all crashing down. I leaned back, letting the cold weight of truth settle around me. Cassandra's Instagram feed was a shrine to a lifestyle she couldn't afford. designer bags, lavish dinners, and luxury vacations. Ethan's impulsive purchases piled up. New cars, gym memberships, nights out they never talked about. The debts were hidden, but not well enough. My mind, trained for years as an engineer, searched for the weak points. Every late notice, every bounced payment was a crack in their facade. I jotted down account numbers, dates, amounts, a precise ledger of their lies. The house creaked and groaned, old bones echoing the tension inside. I pressed my ear to the floor, listening for footsteps, breaths, anything out of place. They moved like predators, confident in their plan, unaware that the trap was closing. One night, as the snow blanketed the neighborhood, I found myself pulling out my phone to call Martin. A steady voice in the chaos, he reminded me of the law's cold efficiency. "They're vultures, Gerald," he said, "thinking they can pick you apart because you're older. You're going to let them?" I didn't hesitate. "No more," I told him. "It's time to push back." We mapped out the strategy: financial freezes, eviction notices, and legal safeguards. Martin's experience cut through the noise, turning my anger into weapons, tools precise enough to dismantle their scheme. I felt a strange calm as the plan took shape. Years of providing, forgiving, and waiting had built me up. Now that same resolve would bring them down. Each paper signed was a stroke of justice. Each call placed a reminder they had underestimated me. As winter tightened its grip outside, the storm inside the house was only beginning. The day after setting my plan in motion, the house felt different. Heavier, as if it knew a storm was coming. Ethan and Cassandra were oblivious, caught up in their own schemes, laughing over drinks and plotting their next move. But behind their confident smiles, cracks were beginning to show. The phone rang early, Martin's voice sharp and serious. "Gerald, the accounts are frozen. They're already panicking. You did well to act fast." Relief washed over me, but there was no time to rest. This was just the beginning. I stood at the window, watching snowflakes drift down like silent witnesses to the unraveling. I thought of Margaret, her gentle hands and steady presence, the rock of our family. She would have hated this chaos, but I knew she'd understand why I had to fight. Word spread quickly. Family whispers turned to hushed conversations. At the grocery store, neighbors shot cautious glances my way, unsure what to believe. The rumors of my decline and instability had lost their grip. Now, it was clear who held the power. Ethan's calls became frantic, full of threats and desperate pleas. "Dad, this isn't the way. We can fix this. Please." But I had no intention of stepping back. Not now. Not ever. Cassandra's messages were colder, calculated. She threatened legal action, painted me as the villain in their narrative. But the evidence was damning, texts revealing her contempt, voicemails with Ethan admitting their plans to push me out. They had walked straight into my trap. One evening, Martin and I met to review the growing pile of proof. Each new piece felt like a nail in their coffin. Late payment notices, canceled credit cards, invoices for extravagant spending that didn't benefit a soul but themselves. "The harder they push, the faster they fall," Martin said, eyes gleaming with a mix of satisfaction and caution. "But be prepared. They'll try to turn the family against you." And they did. At the next family gathering, the air was thick with tension. Whispers of concern, forced smiles hiding loyalties. Diana, my sister-in-law, pulled me aside. "Gerald, be careful. They're spinning stories. You don't want to lose what little support you have." I nodded, understanding that the battle was not only in courtrooms but in hearts and minds. But I was ready. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night had led to this moment, the moment where truth would shatter their lies. I returned home one night to find the house eerily quiet. The silence was a warning. Cassandra and Ethan were plotting, but their confidence was fading. The weight of exposure was crushing them. I stood alone in the dim living room, shadows stretching long across the floor. I was tired, yes, but more determined than ever. This fallout was painful, but it was justice in motion. They thought they could break me. Instead, they were breaking themselves. The storm had passed, but the air still carried its chill. Walking away from the house that once held so many memories, I felt a strange mix of loss and relief. It was over. The betrayal, the battles, the broken ties. What lay ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like my future was truly mine to shape. I found myself in a small apartment, its bare walls a stark contrast to the life I'd left behind. The The space was unfamiliar, but quiet. A blank slate where I could finally breathe. The city skyline gleamed through the window, lights flickering like distant promises. Here, without the weight of the past pressing down, I could begin again. Unpacking boxes filled with keepsakes, I found reminders of a life once shared. Margaret's scarf, a drawing Ethan made when he was 6, contracts from my engineering days. These were my anchors, pieces of a story that hadn't ended despite everything. I placed them carefully, honoring the past while letting it settle peacefully around me. Loneliness crept in, but it no longer felt like a prison. Instead, it was a space for reflection and growth. I reached out to friends who had stood by me, Martin, Diana, and Lydia, the ones who reminded me of who I was beyond the shadows of betrayal. Their support was steady, grounding me when doubts surfaced. I began to rediscover passions I'd set aside. Late nights spent sketching blueprints, early mornings walking the city streets, the simple joy of a hot cup of coffee savored in silence. These small rituals became acts of reclaiming myself, building strength from within. But new beginnings weren't without their challenges. Old wounds ached and the absence of family was a hollow echo. The memories of Margaret's warmth and Ethan's laughter lingered, bittersweet and sharp. I allowed myself to grieve, knowing it was part of healing. Slowly, I started to envision a future not defined by what I'd lost, but by what I could create. Plans took shape. Projects, travels, even the possibility of new connections. Hope wasn't a distant dream anymore. It was a quiet flame growing brighter with each passing day. Every step forward was a declaration. I was no longer a victim. I was a man forging a path through the ashes, learning that sometimes endings were just the beginning. The days grew colder, and so did the world around me. But inside, a fire burned steady, less anger now, more determination. I wasn't just surviving, I was preparing. Preparing for what lay ahead, for the final showdown that loomed like a storm on the horizon. Every call, every message from Ethan and Cassandra reminded me of the battle that wasn't over. Their words were sharp, loaded with threats and promises of resistance, but I was no longer the man who would shrink away. I was ready to face them head on. I tightened my grip on the folder of evidence. Documents, recordings, everything I'd collected with Martin's help. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine. It was about standing up to the betrayal and showing them I wasn't broken. The weight of the coming Christmas dinner pressed down on me. It would be their stage to humiliate me, to rally the family against me. But I had a different plan, a reckoning wrapped in cold truth and unshakable resolve. Friends and allies gathered quietly, their support a shield against the storm. Diana's steady presence reminded me I wasn't alone. Lydia's encouragement gave me strength when doubts tried to creep in. Together, we prepared for the moment when everything would come crashing down. Some nights, I replayed the confrontation in my mind, the sharp glances, the whispered conversations, the simmering tension. I knew they underestimated the man I'd become. The man who'd learned that sometimes silence was the loudest weapon. I honed my voice, practicing calm and clarity, ready to cut through lies and deflections. No theatrics, just truth laid bare. I wanted them to see me, not as a victim but as a force they couldn't ignore. The past still haunted me, the warmth of Margaret's smile, the echoes of better days with Ethan before the bitterness took hold. But those memories were no longer chains, they were fuel. Fuel to push forward and claim what was rightfully mine. The night before the dinner, I stood by the window watching snow fall, each flake a reminder of the fragile nature of the world we live in. I was ready. Not for revenge, for justice, for peace. When the day came, I walked into that dining room with my head held high, the folder tucked under my arm like armor. Every step was a statement. I was not the broken father they wanted to erase. I was a man reclaiming his story. The cold winter sun cast long shadows, but inside me, something new was beginning to warm. Hope. After the storm of betrayal and loss, I found myself standing at a crossroads, staring into a horizon that promised something different. Not just survival, but renewal. The house I once called home was no longer mine, but the life I wanted to build was waiting. Blank, uncarved, full of possibility. I moved through the days with a cautious optimism, each morning a chance to rewrite my story. The pain of the past hadn't vanished, but it no longer controlled me. Instead, it fueled a fire to grow stronger, wiser. Martin stayed by my side, his quiet counsel a steady anchor in the whirlwind of change. "Gerald, you're doing more than you realize," he said one afternoon, flipping through some papers that mapped out the legal battles still ahead. "You're reclaiming not just your property, but your dignity. That's a victory that money can't buy." I nodded, the weight of his words settling deep. It wasn't about the house or the bank accounts anymore. It was about proving to myself that I still had a place in this world, that I was more than the sum of their lies and greed. Diana's visits became a cherished routine, her presence a reminder that family extends beyond blood. We talked late into the nights about everything and nothing, the future, memories of Margaret, the quiet victories that often go unnoticed. One evening, Lydia stopped by with a handful of fresh-baked cookies and an invitation to join a community project helping local families in need. "It's a chance to turn pain into purpose," she said with a smile that lit the room. I accepted, knowing that giving back was a step toward healing. Work became my salvation. I poured myself into rebuilding, renovating, fixing not just houses, but also broken dreams. Each nail hammered, each wall painted, was a brushstroke on the canvas of my new life. The rhythm of labor grounded me, kept my mind from drifting into darker places. Yet even as I found solace in routine, the shadows of Ethan and Cassandra lurked. Their voices echoed in my thoughts, mocking, threatening, and reminding me of battles yet to be won. But their noise faded beneath the steady beat of my resolve. I began reconnecting with old friends and forging new relationships. Conversations with Martin evolved from legal tactics to life philosophies. "This is your second act, Gerald," he said once. "Make it a masterpiece." And so I started to dream again. I dusted off old hobbies long neglected, the jazz records Margaret loved, the sketchbook tucked away in the closet, the guitar gathering dust in the corner. Music, art, creation, they whispered promises of joy and renewal. The community project became more than just charity. It became a beacon of hope. Working alongside neighbors, hearing their stories of struggle and strength, I realized I wasn't alone. We were all searching for light in our own darkness. Diana helped me organize a neighborhood gathering, a simple dinner filled with laughter and shared stories. The warmth of connection thawed old wounds. Faces once distant became familiar, a new kind of family forming from the ashes of the old. As Christmas approached, I felt a cautious excitement, a flicker of anticipation I hadn't known in years. The season no longer brought dread, but a chance to embrace new traditions, to make memories untarnished by betrayal. Martin reminded me to take care of myself, to nurture the body and soul. "Strength isn't just about endurance," he said. "It's about balance." I began walking again, breathing deeply in the crisp air and letting nature's calm seep into my being. The apartment was modest but mine, a sanctuary where peace could grow. I decorated it with reminders of the past and hopes for the future. A photo of Margaret's smile, a painting I'd started, a candle flickering softly on the windowsill. Letters from old friends arrived, their words weaving a tapestry of support. Some reached out with apologies, others with invitations to reconnect. I responded when I was ready, careful to guard my healing heart. Night times were quieter now, less haunted by memories. When sleep came, it carried me gently, rather than tossing me into storms of regret. I learned to be gentle with myself, forgiving the mistakes I'd made, embracing the lessons they brought. Facing the future wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about carrying it with grace, letting it shape, but not shackle me. I was learning to stand tall again, grounded in who I was and who I wanted to become. The legal battles were still there, shadows on the periphery, but they no longer defined me. I faced each challenge with calm determination, knowing that my strength came not from anger, but from hope. The horizon stretched wide and open, a canvas waiting for my touch. I wasn't just surviving, I was ready to thrive. And with every step forward, the new horizon grew brighter, promising a life reclaimed and a story rewritten. The room was thick with tension, heavy enough to choke on, faces filled with anticipation, doubt, barely concealed hostility. I sat calm, hands folded around the folder beneath my chair. This was the moment everything changed. Ethan stood at the head of the table, glass raised, his smile practiced but hollow. Cassandra beside him, perfect posture, eyes gleaming with quiet triumph. They thought this was their victory lap, the final act in their betrayal. Thank you all for coming, Ethan said loud, rehearsed. This Christmas is about family, about moving forward. But there's something we need to address. I watched him carefully, calm on the surface, pulse quickening beneath. The folder felt heavy, a sharp edge hidden in plain sight. His voice hardened. We've talked as a family. It's clear, Dad is no longer part of this household. It's time for him to leave. Gasps rippled through the room. Diana's hand flew to her mouth. Victor leaned forward, frowning. Cassandra's smile sharpened as she nodded. Whispers started, shock mixing with judgment. All eyes turned to me, waiting for my collapse. They believed the rumors Ethan spread about my instability. They expected me to crumble. But I didn't. I rose slowly. The chair scraped loudly on hardwood. Silence fell instantly. Every gaze fixed on me as I spoke, voice steady and clear. Is that so, Ethan? You've decided I'm done. His smirk deepened. It's for your own good, Dad. You'll thank us later. I reached beneath my chair, pulling out the folder. Curious glances met its plain cover, but Ethan's confidence didn't waver. Cassandra leaned closer, whispering, fingers brushing his arm. I stepped forward, holding the folder like a final gift. Open it, I said, tone calm but edged with steel. Ethan hesitated. His smirk faltered. He took the folder, fingers trembling as he flipped it open. The room grew silent. Candlelight flickered, casting shadows across his face. His eyes scanned the first page. An eviction notice, bold and unyielding, addressed to him and Cassandra. His breath caught. His hand trembled as he turned the next, a court order freezing their accounts. Then came the list of debts, lies, recorded proof of their plan to defraud me. What is this? He shouted, voice cracking with shock. The folder slipped, scattering papers across the table, near the turkey. You can't do this, Cassandra snapped, voice shaking despite herself. She grabbed a sheet, reading aloud, but trembled under the weight of evidence. Guests leaned in, whispers swelling into disbelief. Diana stood, grabbing a page with wide eyes. Is this true, Ethan? You tried to sell his house? Her voice cut through like a blade. Ethan flushed red, stammered, glass clattering, wine spilling. It's not what it looks like, he pleaded. I stepped back, letting chaos unfold. The folder struck true. My weapon found its mark. Cassandra's eyes darted, searching for allies, finding none. Ethan struggled to gather scattered papers, shaking hands betraying unraveling facade. I stood firm, heart steady, years of weightlifting. They'd set the stage, but I rewrote the ending. The front door loomed, framed by dim hallway light. Someone pointed, voice lost in clamor. I stayed rooted, eyes locked on Ethan. He thought he'd broken me. Now he was falling apart. The dining room exploded. Voices overlapping, some shouting, others whispering, all eyes darting between evidence and the two betrayers. Ethan slumped, hands clutching head, eviction notice crumpled in fist. Cassandra stood, flushed, nails digging into a napkin, desperate to salvage dignity. Guests rose, some shouting, some shaking heads in disbelief. They scanned papers, absorbing harsh truths. I stood at edge, hands in pockets, watching their world unravel. Explain this, Ethan, Diana demanded, waving a bank statement, voice cutting through noise. You told us Dad was losing his mind, but this says you plan to sell his house. Ethan's eyes snapped up, wild and desperate. He's twisting everything. We were trying to help him. Victor barked, snatching a paper. This is a recording of you plotting to kick him out. You called him a burden. Cassandra stepped forward, trembling voice. Everyone calm down. It's a misunderstanding. We only wanted what's best for Gerald. Best? Lydia's voice rang sharp, pointing at Cassandra. You lied, spread rumors, called him crazy, all to steal his home. The room erupted, voices clashing, papers rustling, emotions raw. A child ducked behind her mother, startled. Tears welled in Cassandra's eyes, mascara smudging, but chin stayed high, clinging to last dignity. Ethan unraveled faster, lunging for the folder, desperate to gather papers. Diana pulled it away, face hard with disgust. Enough, Ethan, she snapped. You've shamed this family. He turned to me, voice breaking. Dad, please, tell them it's a mistake. We didn't mean it like that. I met his gaze, expression unyielding. You meant every word, I said softly but firmly. You made your choice. Live with it. Cassandra grabbed Ethan's arm, voice desperate hiss. We're sorry. We'll fix this. Just don't do this. We can work it out. I shook my head, stepping back. You had years to fix this. You chose greed instead. Guests began leaving, coats gathered. Victor muttered about disgrace. Diana paused, looking at me with soft eyes. "I should have known better, Gerald," she said quietly. "I'm sorry," I nodded. Apologies meaningless now. Truth was out, sharp and undeniable. Ethan's shoulders shook, voice rising in last plea. "Dad, you can't throw us out. This is our home too." I turned to the living room, voice low but final. It always was. Their pleas faded behind me as the dining room door swung shut. Muffling voices. I stood in quiet, Christmas lights filtering through the window, casting soft patterns on floor. Family photos watched silently. Margaret's smile, faint echo of what was lost. I straightened one frame, fingers lingering on glass. Outside, car doors slammed, engines started. The storm passed. Ethan and Cassandra remained inside, begging, bargaining, but it was over. They built the trap. I turned it on them. The front door creaked open, then slammed shut with finality I didn't need to witness. I didn't look back. So, what would you do if the people you trusted most, the ones you built your life around, turned their backs on you? When family becomes your greatest enemy, how far would you go to protect what's rightfully yours? Would you fight, forgive, or walk away? This story is a reminder that betrayal cuts deep, but strength comes from standing your ground and reclaiming your life, no matter the cost. I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a moment when those closest to you doubted your worth? How did you respond? Share your experiences and thoughts in the comments below. Your story might just inspire someone else to find their own courage. If you found this story powerful or relatable, please like this video and share it with friends who appreciate real, raw stories of resilience and redemption. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story where truth meets justice and the underdog fights back. Thank you for watching and being part of this journey. Remember, sometimes the hardest battles lead to the strongest victories.